Welcome to the hunting hour. Eli Mercer and Lena thought they had defeated the Hollow Man. The town of Black Hollow seemed quieter, almost peaceful, but beneath the surface, an unsettling calm lingered. Eli tried to return to his normal life, but the memories of the forest and the whispers haunted him. Every night, Eli dreamed of the forest. The trees seemed to call to him, the branches reaching out like skeletal hands. He woke up in a cold sweat, the whispers echoing in his mind. Lena, too, felt the unease. She found a new symbol carved into the wall of her motel room, a symbol she had never seen before. The townspeople were tight-lipped, avoiding Eli and Lena as if they carried a curse. Old Man Harris, who had once been their ally, now stared at them with hollow eyes. The sense of dread grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eli and Lena decided to return to the forest. They needed answers. The symbol in Lena's room was a clue, and they couldn't ignore it. Armed with flashlights and a sense of determination, they ventured into the woods. The forest was eerily silent, the air thick with anticipation. As they walked deeper, the whispers began. Soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but growing louder with each step. Eli's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced at Lena, who nodded in silent agreement. They had to keep going. Suddenly a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mara, the mysterious woman they had met before. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice a mere whisper. "The Hollow Man was only a guardian. The true source of the whispers lies deeper in the forest." Eli and Lena exchanged a worried glance. "What do you mean?" Eli asked. Mara pointed to a path that seemed to lead into darkness. "Follow the path to the whispering tree. There you will find the answers you seek, but be warned, the forest is alive and it feeds on secrets." With a sense of foreboding, Eli and Lena followed Mara's directions. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the heart of the forest. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Eli felt a chill run down his spine. What secrets did the forest hold? Finally, they reached the whispering tree. It was ancient and massive, its branches stretching towards the sky like twisted fingers. The tree seemed to pulse with energy, and the whispers emanated from its core. Eli and Lena approached cautiously. The tree spoke in riddles, its voice a haunting melody. It showed them visions of the town's true origin, a ritual gone wrong, a child sacrificed, and a forest spirit corrupted. Eli's mind reeled with the revelations. The curse was never lifted, only redirected. As the visions faded, Eli noticed a new mark on his chest. Lena began to lose time, waking up in places she didn't remember going. The whispers grew louder, and the townspeople began to act strangely. The sense of dread was overwhelming. As the visions faded, Eli noticed a new mark on his chest. Lena began to lose time, waking up in places she didn't remember going. The whispers grew louder, and the townspeople began to act strangely. The sense of dread was overwhelming. Eli recorded a whisper on tape, hoping to find a clue. When he played it back, the whisper said, "You freed the wrong one." The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The Hollow Man was not the true enemy. The forest itself was the source of the curse. The screen faded to black, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats. The mystery deepened, and the suspense grew. What would Eli and Lena do next? The answers lay in the heart of the Whispering Woods. Eli and Lena stood at the edge of the forest, the morning mist curling around their feet like ghostly fingers. The Whispering Tree's visions had left them both shaken, but determined to uncover the truth. They knew the forest held secrets, and it was time to confront them. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches whispering in a language neither could understand. The air grew colder, and the light dimmed, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. "We need to find out what the tree was trying to show us," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something we're missing." Eli nodded, his eyes scanning the surroundings. The townspeople know more than they're letting on. We need to get them to talk. Their first stop was the home of Old Man Harris, the town's oldest resident. He had lived through the town's darkest days and had seen things most people wouldn't believe. But when they arrived at his cabin, they found the door ajar and the interior ransacked. "Harris?" Eli called out, stepping inside. "Are you here?" There was no response, only the sound of the wind rustling through the broken windows. Lena picked up a photograph from the floor, its frame cracked. It showed a younger Harris with a group of children, all smiling at the camera. "Look at this," she said, handing the photo to Eli. "These kids, they look like the ones in the visions." Eli examined the photo, his brow furrowing. "You're right, but why would Harris have this?" Before they could ponder further, a noise from the back of the cabin caught their attention. They moved cautiously, finding Harris huddled in a corner, muttering to himself. "They're coming. They're coming for us all." "Harris, what happened here?" Eli asked, kneeling beside the old man. Harris looked up, his eyes wide with fear. "The forest. It knows. It remembers. You shouldn't have gone to the tree." Lena placed a hand on his shoulder. "What do you mean? What did we see?" "The tree, it's a guardian. It shows the past, but it also sees the future. The forest is angry. It wants revenge." Eli and Lena exchanged glances. "Revenge for what?" Eli pressed. Harris shook his head. "The sacrifice. The child. It was never meant to be. The forest spirit was corrupted, and now it wants to reclaim what was lost." As they left Harris's cabin, the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. The forest was not just a backdrop to their investigation. It was an active participant, and it had its own agenda. Their next stop was the town's library, a small, dusty building that seemed forgotten by time.
"We believe it might be connected to the recent events," Lena explained. "Anything you can tell us would be helpful." The librarian hesitated, then sighed. "Follow me." She led them to a back room filled with old books and documents. "This is the town's archive. You'll find what you're looking for here. But be careful. Some things are better left buried." Eli and Lena spent hours combing through the records, piecing together the town's dark history. They found references to a ritual performed by the town's founders, a desperate attempt to stop a plague that had ravaged the community. A child was sacrificed, and the forest spirit was invoked to protect the town. But something had gone wrong. The spirit had been corrupted, and the town had been cursed ever since. As they left the library, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town. The whispers in the forest grew louder, and Eli felt a chill run down his spine. "We need to go back to the tree," he said. "There's something we missed." Lena nodded, her face set with determination. "Let's go." They returned to the forest, the darkness closing in around them. The whispering tree stood tall and ominous, its branches swaying in the wind. Eli placed a hand on the tree's trunk, feeling the rough bark beneath his fingers. "What do you want from us?" he whispered. The tree's whispers grew louder, and Eli felt a strange sensation wash over him. Visions flashed before his eyes, the ritual, the sacrifice, the child's spirit trapped in the forest. And then a new vision, a clue. He saw a hidden cave deep within the forest, its entrance covered by thick vines. Inside, There was something important, something that could help them break the curse. "We need to find that cave," Eli said, pulling back from the tree. "It's the key to all of this." Lena nodded, her eyes wide with realization. "Let's go." As they ventured deeper into the forest, the whispers grew louder, guiding them to their destination. They found the cave, its entrance hidden by the dense foliage. With a deep breath, they stepped inside, ready to face whatever awaited them. The cave was dark and damp, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. They moved cautiously, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. At the back of the cave, they found an altar covered in ancient symbols. In the center was a small, weathered box. Eli opened it, revealing a collection of old, yellowed papers. "These are the original records," Lena said, her voice filled with awe. "The truth about the ritual." As they read through the documents,
"We need to perform the ritual," Eli said, his voice steady. "It's the only way to end this." Lena nodded, her determination unwavering. "Let's do it." As they prepared to leave the cave, a chilling whisper echoed through the darkness. "You freed the wrong one." Eli and Lena exchanged a glance, their resolve strengthening. They knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready to face whatever the forest had in store for them. The hunt was far from over, and the true battle was just beginning. Eli and Lena stood at the edge of the forest, the whispering tree looming in the distance. The air was thick with tension, and the whispers seemed to grow louder with each passing moment. They knew that the ritual to break the curse would not be easy, and the forest and the townspeople would do everything in their power to stop them. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The whispers grew more insistent, filling their minds with doubt and fear. But Eli and Lena pressed on, determined to end the curse once and for all. They reached the clearing where the whispering tree stood, its gnarled roots twisting into the ground like ancient serpents. The tree seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and the whispers emanated from its very core. Eli and Lena knew that this was the source of the curse, and they had to perform the ritual here. Lena began to draw the symbols on the ground, her hands shaking as she worked. Eli kept watch, his eyes scanning the forest for any signs of danger. The townspeople had been acting strangely ever since they returned to the woods, and he knew they would try to stop them. As Lena finished the last symbol, the ground began to tremble. The whispers grew louder, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. Eli and Lena stood in the center of the symbols, their hands clasped together as they began to chant the ancient words. The forest seemed to come alive around them, the trees swaying and groaning as if in pain. The whispers turned into screams, and the ground shook violently. Eli and Lena held on to each other, their voices rising above the chaos. Suddenly, the townspeople burst into the clearing, their eyes wild with fear and anger. They shouted and screamed, trying to disrupt the ritual. Eli and Lena stood their ground, their voices unwavering as they continued to chant. The whispering tree began to glow with an eerie light, its roots writhing and twisting as if in agony. The townspeople fell to their knees, clutching their heads as the whispers grew deafening. Eli and Lena could feel the power of the curse weakening, but they knew they had to keep going.
Just as they reached the final words of the ritual, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mara, her eyes filled with a strange, otherworldly light. She raised her hand, and the whispers seemed to converge on her, their voices merging into one. "You cannot break the curse," Mara said, her voice echoing through the clearing. "The forest will never let you go." Eli and Lena stood at the edge of the forest, the whispering tree looming in the distance. The air was thick with tension, and the whispers seemed to grow louder with each passing moment. They knew that the ritual to break the curse would not be easy, and the forest and the townspeople would do everything in their power to stop them. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands. The whispers grew more insistent, filling their minds with doubt and fear. But Eli and Lena pressed on, determined to end the curse once and for all. They reached the clearing where the whispering tree stood, its gnarled roots twisting into the ground like ancient serpents. The tree seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and the whispers emanated from its very core. Eli and Lena knew that this was the source of the curse, and they had to perform the ritual here. Lena began to draw the symbols on the ground, her hands shaking as she worked. Eli kept watch, his eyes scanning the forest for any signs of danger. The townspeople had been acting strangely ever since they returned to the woods, and he knew they would try to stop them. As Lena finished the last symbol, the ground began to tremble. The whispers grew louder, and the air seemed to crackle with energy. Eli and Lena stood in the center of the symbols, their hands clasped together as they began to chant the ancient words. The forest seemed to come alive around them, the trees swaying and groaning as if in pain. The whispers turned into screams, and the ground shook violently. Eli and Lena held on to each other, their voices rising above the chaos. Suddenly, the townspeople burst into the clearing, their eyes wild with fear and anger. They shouted and screamed, trying to disrupt the ritual. Eli and Lena stood their ground, their voices unwavering as they continued to chant. The whispering tree began to glow with an eerie light, its roots writhing and twisting as if in agony. The townspeople fell to their knees, clutching their heads as the whispers grew deafening. Eli and Lena could feel the power of the curse weakening, but they knew they had to keep going. Just as they reached the final words of the ritual, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mara, her eyes filled with a strange, otherworldly light. She raised her hand, and the whispers seemed to converge on her, their voices merging into one. "You cannot break the curse," Mara said, her voice echoing through the clearing. "The forest will never let you go." When the light faded, the whispering tree was gone, and the clearing was silent. The townspeople lay unconscious on the ground, and Mara had vanished. Eli and Lena stood in the center of the symbols, their hands still clasped together. They had done it. The curse was broken. But as they looked around the clearing, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching them. The forest was silent, but the air was thick with an unspoken threat. Eli and Lena knew that their journey was far from over. As they made their way back to the town, they couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the forest held. The curse may have been broken, But the darkness that lurked in the shadows was still very real, and they knew that the hunting hour was far from over. Eli and Lena stood at the edge of the forest, the weight of their recent ritual pressing heavily on their minds. The forest, which had been alive with whispers and rustling leaves, now stood eerily silent. The air felt thick, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. "We did it, right?" Lena asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We broke the curse?" Eli glanced at her, uncertainty clouding his eyes. "I hope so, but something doesn't feel right." As they made their way back to the town, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows seemed to move just beyond their line of sight, and the silence was almost deafening. Back in Black Hollow, the townspeople were going about their daily routines, but there was an undercurrent of tension. Eli and Lena decided to visit Old Man Harris, hoping he might have some insight into what had happened. Old Man Harris's cabin was at the edge of town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and gnarled trees. They found him sitting on his porch, staring out into the distance. "We did the ritual," Eli said, taking a seat next to the old man, "but something feels off." Old Man Harris nodded slowly. "The forest is ancient, and its secrets run deep. Sometimes, when you think you've solved one problem, you uncover another." Lena shivered. "What do you mean?" "The Hollow Man was just one part of the curse," Harris explained. "The forest itself is alive, and it's not easily tamed. You may have disrupted the balance." As they left Harris's cabin, Eli and Lena couldn't shake the feeling of unease. They decided to return to the forest, hoping to find some answers. The deeper they went, the more the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air grew colder, and the silence was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. They reached the clearing where they had performed the ritual. The symbols they had drawn on the ground were still there, but they seemed to pulse with a faint, eerie light. "Look," Lena whispered, pointing to the ground. "The symbols, they're glowing." Eli knelt down, examining the symbols closely. "This isn't right. The ritual was supposed to break the curse, not make it stronger." As they stood there, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The trees around them seemed to come alive, their branches swaying and creaking. "We need to get out of here," Eli said, grabbing Lena's hand. "Now!" They ran through the forest, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The whispers grew louder, filling their ears with a cacophony of voices. It felt as if the forest itself was trying to trap them. Just as they reached the edge of the forest, the ground gave way beneath them. They tumbled into a... Lena nodded, wincing as she stood. "Yeah, I think so. What is this place?" They looked around, realizing they were in some sort of underground chamber. The walls were covered in ancient symbols, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. "This must be where the original ritual was performed," Eli said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "The one that started all of this." As they explored the chamber, they found a series of old, tattered books. Eli picked one up, carefully flipping through the pages. "These are records of the town's history," he said. "It looks like the original settlers made a pact with the forest spirit, but something went wrong." Lena shivered. "What do we do now?" "We need to find a way to undo the original ritual," Eli said. "It's the only way to truly break the curse." As they continued to search the chamber, they found a hidden passage leading deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, and the darkness seemed to press in around them. They reached a large open cavern where a massive tree stood in the center. Its roots twisted and turned, reaching out like tendrils. "This must be the heart of the forest," Eli said,
his voice barely a whisper. "The source of the curse." As they approached the tree, they heard a low, rumbling voice. "You should not have come here." The ground shook, and the tree's roots began to move, wrapping around their legs and pulling them toward the tree. Eli struggled, trying to free himself. "We have to break the curse." The voice laughed, a deep, resonant sound that echoed through the cavern. "You cannot break what you do not understand." As the roots tightened around them, Eli and Lena realized they were in a fight for their lives. The forest was not going to let them go easily. With a final, desperate effort, Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver knife. He slashed at the roots, cutting through them and freeing himself. He turned to Lena, who was still struggling. "Hold on!" With a few quick cuts, he freed her as well. They stumbled back, breathing heavily. "We need to get out of here," Eli said, his voice urgent. "Now!" They ran through the cavern, the ground shaking beneath them. The whispers grew louder, filling their ears with a cacophony of voices. Just as they reached the exit, the ground gave way beneath them. They tumbled into the darkness, the whispers following them down. The screen fades to black. Eli and Lena found themselves in complete darkness, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The fall had been disorienting, but they were unharmed. Eli fumbled for his flashlight, the beam cutting through the blackness to reveal an underground cavern. Its walls covered in ancient symbols and roots that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. "Where are we?" Lena whispered, her voice trembling. Eli shook his head, his eyes scanning the cavern. "I don't know, but we need to find a way out." As they ventured deeper into the cavern, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow faintly, guiding them through the labyrinthine passages. Eli's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the curse that had plagued Black Hollow for centuries. They reached a large chamber, at the center of which stood a stone altar covered in moss and surrounded by candles that flickered with an unnatural light. On the altar lay a book, its pages yellowed with age and filled with cryptic writings. "This must be it," Eli said, approaching the altar, "the source of the curse." Lena hesitated, her eyes fixed on the book. "Are you sure we should touch it?" Eli nodded, his determination unwavering. "We have to. It's the only way to end this." He reached for the book, but as his fingers brushed the cover, the whispers grew deafening, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. The roots on the walls writhed, and the candles' flames danced wildly. "Eli, look!" Lena pointed to the far end of the chamber, where a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mara, her eyes glowing with an eerie light. "You shouldn't be here," Mara said, her voice echoing through the cavern. "The forest won't let you leave." Eli stepped back, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Mara's expression was sorrowful. "The curse is deeper than you know. The Hollow Man was just a guardian. The true source lies within the forest itself. It feeds on fear and secrets." Lena's eyes widened. "Then how do we stop it?" Mara shook her head. "You can't. The forest is eternal. It will always find a way to survive." Eli clenched his fists, his frustration mounting. "There has to be a way. We can't let it continue." Mara's gaze softened. "There is one way, but it's dangerous. You must confront the heart of the forest, the whispering tree. Only then can you hope to break the curse." The ground shook violently, and the cavern began to collapse. Eli grabbed the book and turned to Lena. "We need to get out of here. Now." They sprinted through the passages, the walls crumbling around them. The whispers "We need to find the whispering tree," Eli said, his voice resolute. "It's the only way to end this." Lena nodded, her determination matching his. "Let's do it." As they ventured deeper into the forest, the whispers returned, guiding them toward their final confrontation. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches forming a twisted path that led to the heart of the forest. They reached a clearing, at the center of which stood the whispering tree. It was ancient and massive, its roots stretching deep into the earth. The air around it was thick with whispers, and the ground seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Eli approached the tree, the book in his hands. "This is it! The source of the curse!" Lena stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the tree. "What do we do?" Eli opened the book, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and writings. "We need to perform the ritual. It's the only way to break the curse." As they began the ritual, the whispers grew louder, and the ground trembled. The tree's roots writhed, and the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. Eli's voice shook as he recited the ancient words, his determination unwavering. The ground beneath them split open, revealing a dark abyss. The whispers reached a deafening crescendo, and the forest seemed to come alive, its branches closing in around them. Eli and Lena stood their ground, their voices rising above the chaos. As the final words of the ritual were spoken, the ground shook violently, and the tree's roots burst into flames. The whispers fell silent, and the forest seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Eli and Lena watched as the tree crumbled, its dark energy dissipating into the night. "It's over," Eli said, his voice filled with exhaustion and relief. Lena nodded, her eyes filled with hope. "We did it." As they turned to leave, a chilling whisper echoed through the forest. "You freed the wrong one." The screen fades to black.